Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges, and I do advocacy for obsessive compulsive disorder, in particular, pure OCD, which is what we call the community of individuals that have intrusive thoughts, images, sensations, and mental rituals, which makes it distinct between what we normally know as OCD with a lot of physical rituals. It also happens to be the name of my memoir, Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Today, I wanted to talk about acceptance. Now, what's prompting me to want to talk about this is I actually just did an episode. It was published yesterday on the OCD stories. If you don't know the OCD stories, you should. It is such a great podcast done by Stuart Ralph in the UK. Check them out on all the different podcasts. But we talked about acceptance and radical acceptance. And I had wanted to talk about this topic for a really long time, but it's a difficult topic, as I'm sure you know. If you're coming to this video, you probably didn't even want to watch it if it's about acceptance. So I just thought I re-listened to it yesterday, and it just reignited the amount of passion that I have about how we need to be so careful when we're talking about OCD and some of this terminology around recovery that just gets thrown around here and there that really can confuse you, and it can make you look at your relationship with your OCD differently if you misunderstand how it's used, and if this terminology is used out of context. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. But first, I wanted to let you know I'm a certified peer support specialist. I've been working with people with OCD for years and years, providing one-on-one support, group support, and also I have an online community that is an app. And in that app, there's all kinds of support, classes, events, and we will be expanding even more in 2026. It's an opportunity for you to meet other people who just get it from around the world. Whatever you're struggling with, the people in that community are going to understand, and you do not have to do this alone. So check out the link in the description and join at any point when you need support and when you want connection. An OCD, NOCD is an app, and inside that app, you can meet other people. There's resources, and they also do telehealth in many places around the world. Check them out at nocd.com or treatmyocd.com to schedule an assessment and find out if they do therapy near you. All right, let's talk about acceptance. This is an off-the-cuff video. I don't have any notes, mainly because I listened to it yesterday and thought, I've got to talk about this with you. Um, in my groups, we discuss topics every other week. When I have 8-week groups that run, and every other week we do a recovery topic. Acceptance is always one that comes up. Um, and I will tell you also, this may be surprising, is that when acceptance does come up, there's a lot of people that roll their eyes. Why? And this is why I wanted to do this video today. Because acceptance of this disorder is hard. It's challenging, it's difficult, but often acceptance is misused in its terminology and definition as the key, as the finish line, which number one makes people think that it's that the finish line and recovery or whatever is not attainable. I mean, there really isn't a finish line, but but when it's touted that acceptance is that, that this is the way that when you get acceptance, all of a sudden everything's going to be great and okay and peaceful. That's not what acceptance is. But when it's used in that way, and a lot of times what you'll hear people say is just accept the thoughts, just accept the uncertainty, just sit with the thoughts. Those phrases drive me absolute bonkers. Even though I used to actually say those a lot in my advocacy and probably have said some in my older videos. The more I've gotten to know you, the more I've gotten deeper into my recovery, the more I've experienced themes where those kind of things don't work, and they have become harder to attain or harder to move through because I was using, the kind of strategies that don't align with what I needed to move through them. It's so important to understand what acceptance is and what acceptance isn't. So, a couple things. First, I just want to validate to you, if you think to yourself, acceptance is the way out, then I'll never find relief for these reasons, you are not alone. Some of those reasons are this: people believe that acceptance is approval. That means if I accept this and I accept these intrusive thoughts, that means I'm approving of them. Which, of course, with any intrusive thoughts, that's going to be difficult. But when we have a taboo intrusive thoughts, especially, it's difficult. That accepting means I have to accept the uncertainty that I might be what my intrusive thoughts are. Sometimes with just, not so taboo, inflammatory, intrusive thoughts, that can be easier. But when you're dealing with an intrusive thought that in the bigger scheme of the world, that inflammatory, pedophilia theme, incest theme, bestiality theme, things like that, that is inflammatory in the world, harm, suicide, things like that. The idea that you have to accept that uncertainty, that you have to accept there's a possibility, that is going to be your barrier, right? And I don't blame you. And I want you to hear me say that. A lot of people will say, well, if you're not willing to accept the uncertainty, then you're not going to get better. I call bullshit on that. And we've talked a lot on these videos, and I did used to think that way, and you need to know that. Until, again, I've experienced themes where there's absolutely no way I could accept uncertainty that there was a possibility. A lot of times we get around that by saying we're going to accept the irrelevance. That way it just puts you in this position to believe, okay, I don't have to accept that I might be a pedo in order to get better, right? I mean, because some people will say absolutely not and put that block up. And I think that when we're using acceptance in that way, then we're actually isolating people for a good reason. I mean, it's barbaric for someone to have to say, well, you have to accept that there's a possibility you would or wouldn't do something in order to get better. I believe that's barbaric. Um, so approval, acceptance of the uncertainty. And then the third one I want to make sure to mention is this. We do talk about acceptance with the disorder itself, and I really want to dive into this. The acceptance that you're going to have OCD for the rest of your life. Okay, you might disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I'm only speaking from my experience only, and majority of the people that I work with. This is probably one of the bigger obstacles because our tendency when we're living with OCD is to fight it. How do we fight it? Compulsions. We're arguing with our brains because we don't want what our brains are saying to be true. So how we try to prove or disprove it is doing compulsions. So that's the fight. It's also just hard to think I have to surrender to this illness and have it overtake me. That's what we also think about acceptance. But acceptance is not surrendering. But oftentimes we get that confused. If I accept that I'm going to have OCD for life, I'm surrendering to this mental torture for the rest of my life. Acceptance is actually the opposite of that. Acceptance, including radical acceptance, is actually freedom. And you're probably saying you're full of shit. So let me explain. When you continue to fight, doing compulsions, you are continuing the cycle. Stu mentioned this in the podcast, and it's worth mentioning here. There's a saying by Alan Watts. He always talks about the muddy water. The more that you try to clear the muddy water up, the more you're stirring the mud up. If you leave it, and like I said in the podcast, and you have patience, um, I said one other thing and I can't remember. If you have patience and something else, then the water will clear on its own, but it takes time. When we are dealing with an OCD cycle, we don't feel like we have the time because of the urgency. And the urgency is what pushes us to fight, to do the compulsions. I have to know the reason why. I have to know now. That's what drives the cycle, is the urgency and the need for this to resolve, for the water to clear. But what takes time, it takes time and it takes patience. And that's something that we feel we can't access when we are really in an OCD spiral, including yours truly. I'm certainly not here saying that I have the answer and I know how to have patience. When this is happening to me, I was in a bout a couple weeks ago, and it was a good 5 or 6 hours of absolute suffering in the haze, terror. When is this going to pass? And it almost took until I was emotionally exhausted for me to be like, I can't fight this anymore. And finally, it eased up. So when we talk about acceptance, when it comes to some of these things, acceptance can seem very scary. If I am accepting that this is a lifelong illness, if I'm accepting that this is how it's going to be, I'm going to suffer inevitably, and I would rather choose to fight. The counterintuitive part is the fighting is what keeps you stuck. When in life in general, that's probably not the case. With our brains, it is. The way that acceptance is freedom in this, and especially radical acceptance, is accepting that this is how things are right now without judgment, but knowing that everything is susceptible to change. We are scared of that because we find what we're experiencing in the moment intolerable. A lot of the reason why we find it intolerable is because that part of the brain that says we are in danger is screaming at us. This is what therapy does. This is what effective therapy does, is it disrupts that system in order for us to be able to experience our brain screaming at us and not acting in order for us to see that we are okay and we're safe and you don't have to respond to the urgency. Where acceptance comes in is accepting that this is a disorder, accepting that this is the same cycle that happens every single time, and accepting that I will have this disorder forever, but it's not going to torment me every moment of every day forever. When you practice acceptance in these ways, you can accept, okay, I woke up and OCD was very loud today. I can accept that this is my reality today without judgment, but I can also accept that I could wake up tomorrow and it could be quiet. But I can't control that in the moment. Radical acceptance. So the freedom lies in being able to accept what is really going on. And inside of that, being able to make decisions based on that instead of, I've got to get out of this and then I can start my life. I've got to get out of this and then I can have a good day. I've got to stop this and then I can have, then I can go to work or then I can date or then I can, do X, Y, and Z. Acceptance is, this is happening to me right now. I may not like it. It may be uncomfortable, but the more that I fight it, the bigger and the louder it gets. And this takes practice, my friends. And that's why it is so challenging, because to learn something new in the face of your brain saying, this is something you've got to take care of now or else, to practice the practice of acceptance and radical acceptance can take a while. And this is why we want the repetitiveness of behavioral therapy, to be able to do this in a way that teaches us over and over and over and over. So we are able to accept what's going on now and see it for what it is instead of needing to get out of it in order for things to get better. Now, I know that this is a lot. I would urge you to go listen to the podcast. It was so good. It is October, it came out on October 12th, 2025 on the OCD stories on acceptance and radical acceptance. And we really do dive into a lot of the talking points that I just said today, but I did want to give you an overview, and I do think it's important. And lastly, I just want to say this. If you struggle with acceptance, and for many of the reasons or others that I haven't shared today, I want you to know that you're not alone. Acceptance is a wonderful tool to have and to practice. It is not the key to making OCD go away. It is not the key to bringing peace. It's not the key at all to, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be miserable forever. Acceptance is acceptance. I was horrible at it 10 years ago. I'm way better at it now. I anticipate in 10 years I'm going to be double as good as I am at it right now. And so that is the practice of getting better and better and learning to believe this is the same cycle that happens. I can non-judgmentally believe that just because things feel this way today, they're not always going to feel that way. And that's something that a lot of us with OCD really struggle with. So if you struggle with acceptance or any of these things, you need to know you're not alone in this. You need to know it is challenging and that acceptance is not a barrier for you to get help or support. I need you to hear that too. So speaking of support and connection and community, I would urge you if you're really struggling to jump into my community and meet other people, help them or have them walk alongside you wherever you're at. It's there for you when you need us, and we have support weekly, and I have monthly classes and events. I'd love to see you there. So check that out in the description. And if you're looking for therapy, go to nocd at treatmyocd.com. Thanks.